He's doing much better, but Allison's winning all the fights, all the arguments. And so he needs just a little more strength in his voice. So, who is your benefactor? Do you know? We're going to talk about who is your benefactor this morning. First of all, we're going to start with these verses.
Will give you the desire of your heart. The second verse that I'll be reading is Matthew chapter 7, verse 7, which says, "Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened unto you." The third verse I'll be reading is from Mark chapter 9, verse 23, which says, "And Jesus said to him, If you can, all things are possible to him who believes." And finally, the last verse is Philippians chapter 4, verse 19. "And my God will supply all your needs according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus."
So who is your benefactor? What's a benefactor? I know you're thinking about that. Yes, I had to look it up because I don't use words like that. And yet, it rings a clear bell with the passing of my dad and my mom. We're in the process of their last will and testament. And I'm definitely finding out what is a benefactor. Well, a benefactor is one who confers a benefit or a kindly helper. It also can mean one who makes a last will and testament concerning personal property, especially money, or an endowment. Now, I read that definition to you, and I know that there's a bunch of people that are thinking money. And that's not what this is about. Okay, personal property. Some of you may be thinking about, well, what did they own? I got to move this around here. But a benefactor can be something that somebody has left you that's going to be to your benefit. It can be property, it can be money, but definitely what it is in our behalf is our salvation. Now, if you have to ask a person, are you a Christian? People are, oh, I'm a Christian. I know Jesus. I know Jesus. How many times do you hear on TV people, Jesus, Jesus? They throw in the name, and it sounds religious. But when you look at what they're asking for or what they're talking about, Jesus never said it. And you wonder, who are you talking about? And how can he be your benefactor if you're not quoting what Jesus has to say? How can you be that? How can you expect any rewards from him? Well, I have several examples here that I want us to look at that sort of explain our benefactor. And that hopefully you'll look at him more important in your time that you spend with him too. In John chapter 4, for example, we have this Samaritan woman. And this woman, she's half Jew and half Gentile. So she's looked down as a Samaritan, and she's also looked down as a woman. And yet here comes Jesus to the well. She's drawing water. He's going to draw water. We find in when the 12 disciples walk up after the discussion that Jesus has with the woman, is that the disciples find it curious or odd that Jesus is talking to this woman. We find that in 27. In verse 15, at this point, she doesn't understand any of Jesus, what he is saying. Now, she's had some teaching about the future that's coming. There's a Messiah coming. And as a person who is half Samaritan, a Samaritan, half Jewish and half Gentile, this is really something to look forward to. And she is definitely looking forward to this master teacher that's coming. Verse 18, Jesus does not send her away because she is engaged in learning. I'm going to use that phrase several times here this morning. She is engaged at learning. She's not a know-it-all. She has not given up. She's looking to the future. She's charged. When you're looking to the future, you're charged. You're not sitting in your wallow. You're looking to move forward and make something happen in your life. And this lady was doing that as she listened to this man. We find in verse 21 through 24, Jesus does not send her away because she's ignorant. He continues to talk to her because she stays engaged to learn from him. He does not turn her away. Verse 25, she has partial knowledge. She talks about what's coming in the future. There's a Messiah coming. Okay, that's nice. And then in 26, Jesus says, I am he. Now, what does this woman do when she finds out, when he says, I am he? She blows him off, right? Nah. My luck. Come across the Messiah? Nah. I don't see any grand audience or special clothing. I don't see anything. You're not. No. She didn't do any of that. She ran into the nearest city and told the men, come, see, and hear this man. She became the first evangelist. Now, it's one thing to be engaged in learning. It's another thing to take what you have learned and do something with it. And this woman did something with it. Did she set the world on fire? Maybe not. But in her world, she spoke up. And a whole bunch of people came out to listen to Jesus. What is the relationship that we have here with her and Jesus now? Do you think that she views him as her benefactor? Oh, I think so, folks. I think her whole world just changed just because of a pot of water. We have another one in John 4. And in John 4, we have Jesus going to a house, and Martha invites him in. And so, women, if you're going to invite somebody in, what are you supposed to do? Better have the house ready to go. Why, that's not the biggest deal. I mean, the house is what it is. But better get the food around. Better get ready. I got company. I just invited. Is there anything unreasonable about how Martha feels? Not at all. There's nothing that you say, oh, she's such a sinner. No, nothing at all. Martha is her obligation to serve her fellow man, and there was something special about this man, and she invited him into her house. Okay, keep that in mind, because that's not the person we're going to talk about. So the benefactor sits down and starts talking, and Mary gets upset because, or excuse me, not Mary, Martha gets upset about the whole matter, in that Mary does not come into the kitchen or the place of cooking. She sits down at the feet of Jesus. And she is engaged to learn from Jesus. She is engaged to learn from Jesus. And so, Jesus says, Martha, you're bothered and you're distracted. But Mary has chosen the good things. And she'll be rewarded for it. Now, what's the good things? I want to sit down at the table of Jesus who serves, and I want to learn and eat from him. And she found that it was more than she could digest. She was sitting at the feet of the perfect man, the perfect teacher. And she was learning something about herself and about how life could be. Martha didn't see that, but I want you to take the contrast of the two. Martha was obligated, as she's seen fit, to serve her guest. Mary felt compelled to sit down and take advantage of this very special guest. Karen and I have had a few times where we've got to sit down. Rarely do you get around some of the great teachers in the brotherhood. And you will learn things that you never even dreamed about. Lectureships do that. Some of you have gone off to Christian colleges. You have experienced an insight of the Bible that you would have never gotten here or on your own study. And it changes your life. It changes how you think. And Mary wanted that. And Mary was going to be blessed, not because she dropped her work, but because she didn't let anything get between her and God. She recognized who the man was that was going to bless her. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. She wanted life. When you look at in chapter 10, how do you view yourself with Jesus? Chapter 10 of John says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he puts forth all his own, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. And a stranger they simply will not follow, but will flee from him because they do not know the voice of the stranger. Are you engaged in the voice of Jesus? Do you recognize the voice of Jesus? Are you engaged in learning from Jesus? Do you find it fascinating, the things that he has to teach? I find it amazing how he uses agriculture so much. The majority of his parables and stories are agriculture. And that's because the majority of the population was used to raise food. So everybody knew what he was talking about. There wasn't anything technical about it. And when you talk about sheep, and Jesus knowing his sheep and calls them by name, That's a relationship that the benefactor has. He knows you. He knows your needs. And he's asking you, go ahead and call on me. Go ahead and ask me. If your heart's with me, I'll fulfill it. Think of the verses that were read here this morning a few minutes ago. Even in Matthew, in chapter 15, it says, hear and understand. Don't just listen, walk out the door and say, okay, I've put my time in. The rest of the week is mine. What about your relationship with your benefactor? Maybe you think you don't need a benefactor. Maybe you think that your own hands are going to save you someday. Maybe when all of a sudden you are surprised that there is a second life, that this is not the beginning is coming yet. And then all of a sudden you stand before, and this is a judgment time, and you have no counselor. Jesus is not standing next to you, and you're standing there all by yourself. But you saw some others where Jesus stood up for them. But when it came to your turn, Jesus wasn't there. How are you going to produce being your own benefactor? Your soul before God. How are you going to do that? How are you going to prove to God, I'm worthy of coming to your place now? Matthew 25 points that image. And there's a lot of people that say, hey, we didn't see what we were supposed to be doing. We didn't know. These people are begging. They made a grave mistake. They didn't even think they needed a benefactor. They were just scooting through life, doing what they wanted in life. And then all of a sudden they found out life begins after this life. And it begins with judgment. And it also begins with reward. And so for those of us who know that we need a benefactor, we depend on him. We depend on him because we request things of him. And he knows our heart, he knows what we're trying to do, and he'll bless us because of it. In Luke chapter 7, verses 37 through 48. This is an interesting point. I think this is more of the problem that people have with Christ than anything else. Outside, I'm concerned that we have become more lethargic toward Christ. I think people have just gone on with their life. I think this COVID thing has affected churches. I think it's affected individuals. I think there's some faith that has drawn down. And I think there's some faith that has gone up, but not much. And I'm concerned about that. But here is one of a person who is no good. Culture would look at her and say, she's a bad person. So starting with verse 37, behold, there was a woman in a city who was a sinner. And when she learned that he was reclining at the table of a Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster vial of perfume. Standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and kept wiping them with the hair of her head, kissing his feet and anointing them with perfume. Let that sink in. Will you do that for anybody? Now, when the Pharisees who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man was a prophet, he would know who and what sort of person this woman is who's touching him, a sinner. Jesus answered and said, so you can't speak to yourself without God knowing what you said. Jesus knew what they had said to themselves subconsciously. Jesus said, Simon, I have something to say. He replied, say it, teacher. A certain moneylender had two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they were unable to repay, he graciously forgave them both. Which of them, therefore, will love him more? Simon answered and said, well, I suppose the one who forgave the more. And Jesus said, you have judged correctly. Turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet. She has wept my feet with her tears, she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but she, since the time I came in, has not ceased to kiss my feet. Do you kiss anybody's feet in your life? Now you may say, well, God is the only... Don't give me that. Is there anybody you bow to? I've walked in on some people praying, and they're spread out. That's called prostrate out, flat on the floor, humbling themselves, petitioning God for whatever reason. I've seen some people do that in this congregation. I think if Jesus showed up, they would be kissing the feet of Jesus. Do you humble yourself before anybody? Well, there is one person you should be humbling yourself to, and that's your benefactor. Because on Judgment Day, it's all going to come together. My benefactor blessed me and saved me and gave me what I'm about to inherit. What a deal! What a moment. Finally, the relief of wrestling with this body, being relieved of Satan placing these little thoughts in our heads. Satan's gone. He can't do anything. He can't touch you anymore. He has no power. He is gone to punishment. You are now in a perfect atmosphere. You know things you didn't used to know. You can do things you didn't used to be able to do. It's a brand new world with a brand new body in the midst of deity. Everything's changed, folks. Who's going to appreciate it more? The person who thinks, well, I'm not a bad person. I think I swore one time in my life. I'll get baptized just to cover my bases. I'm a pretty good guy. Everybody tells me I'm a pretty good guy. Or the person who, let's take 1 Corinthians 6. They're adulterers, fornicators, homosexuals, murderers, thieves. That's the list that it's given of the church in Corinth. And then Paul says, and such were some of you, but you have been what? Washed. You have been washed. Now the benefactor has touched your life, and it's all gone. This woman, look at how Jesus ends this whole thing up. For this reason I say to you, her sins, which are many. So it's not an argue whether she's a bad person or not. She is a bad person. Culturally, she's a throwaway. She's not been a very good person. But she recognized a benefactor. And her heart was broke. She bowed, she cried, she wiped his dirty feet with her hair. She wanted him to know she was so sorry. And Jesus was convinced her actions spoke louder than words. And so Jesus ends this way. Her sins, which have been many, she loved much, but he who is forgiven little loves little. He turns to her and he says, your sins have been forgiven. Just like that. I have no record of your past. She now starts a new life. What a wonderful moment for that lady. What a wonderful moment. The benefactor paid it all. She was not capable of taking care of this situation. Up to this meeting, Jesus meeting this woman, she knew she could do nothing to remove her guilty conscience. She had no power to do it. She had to live with her conscience, and she had had enough. And when she saw the way out through the Son of God, she chose. She could have walked away. She could have saved the perfume. She could have just went on doing what she does in life, and then all of a sudden you die. But no, she wanted more out of life. She wanted real life. Do these four know their benefactors that we've talked about? Some of them did. Others didn't. I'm concerned that Christians say, I know Jesus, and have no idea who the benefactor is. I'm concerned they couldn't quote one sentence that Jesus has said. How can you go about your day, whatever you do in a day, and say you know Jesus, and you can't quote one sentence that Jesus has said? How can that be? How many of us have gone through the day thinking about something our husband or our wives have said, or maybe even our children, and we thought about what they were saying as we are working? But Jesus, he's one of those things we keep him in the walls here at the church building. And what goes on here stays inside here, and then I go outside. Well, we've heard that one. Folks, the benefactor is world-reaching. He touches everybody, but he forces no one. And so whether you take complete advantage of your benefactor or not is going to be up to you. You want to be a better person? You want to enjoy life more? Jesus says, I came to give you life, and what? I'll let you finish it. If you don't know it, you got to look it up. It's in John. Romans 5:9 says, Peter 5 says, cast your care on him, for he careth for you. Humble yourself that he may exalt you in due time. Your day's coming, folks. Christians are going to be lifted up. Hebrews 13:5, I will never abandon you nor forsake you. That's a promise. That's not a, nice saying. That's a promise. That's why our relationship is going to grow, because Jesus says, I will never abandon you. Even when we blow it and we may sin, Jesus says, I haven't abandoned you. I'm your benefactor. We're going to pick ourselves up. We're going to continue on. Listen carefully. Listen to the door. Behold, I stand at a door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and will dine with him, and he with me. There's your invitation. You know what that was? Did you catch what that was? There's a day coming when we're going to go out to eat with Jesus. That's what he said. What can be more friendly than when you invite somebody over and you have all this food made out and you have this time to sit around and eat and talk? Just think, the day when Jesus says, it's time to eat, Bruce. It's time to eat, Daryl. It's time to eat, Rhonda. Let's sit down. And he starts to call you by your name. And we talk about things of our life, because he knows us better than we know ourselves. That's quite a supper. That's quite a dinner. And he says, I'll do that. I'll do that with you. He says, I'm knocking, I'm asking you, but I won't force you. You want to be the Christian you should be? He says, I give you life. I give you life. So what about it? What do you wrestle with so much in life? I think the problem is you don't understand what's coming. I want you to understand that there are things that are going to beyond our imagination. You want to call it rewards? Maybe so. I look at what's been going on in our family, and I don't think my dad and mom left things to the family because of a reward. I think they left things to us because they loved us. And I think Jesus is going to express love in a way that will be so open and maybe not even practiced in our lifetime yet. And then Jesus is going to show us how to show true love as our benefactor. Will you kneel down then? Oh, I think so. I think a lot of us are going to fall down, are going to be completely laid out, understanding completely that our benefactor has made our life worthwhile. Folks, stop chasing the trinkets of life. You're looking at the shiny things. Karen and I laugh about this. I suppose when you see Katie, you're going to tell her this. When Katie would get tired, she would be 1.5 to 2.5 years old. She would sit there and start doing this. I don't know what this meant. And eventually then she would fall asleep. And I'm telling you, some of you are chasing the trinkets of life. Some of you are doing this. And you don't see beyond what the benefactor has promised for you. Give up the world, folks. Give up the world. And it won't hurt so much anymore. We get hurt because we expect so much. And when it doesn't come the way we expect, we become disappointed or disillusioned. Or just a little more hard of heart. Jesus says, I'm going to give you life. And I'm going to give it in abundance. Folks, when God talks about filling a cup and it's running over, I want to see. I want to be a part of that. I can't imagine somebody has that much ability and power that goes beyond more than I ask for. I'd like to see it. Prepare yourself, folks, and enjoy being a Christian now. If there's anything we can do to make your life better with your benefactor, please let it be known as we stand and sing. From such times are here.